I was born in Kingsville, Texas, near Corpus Christi, to Mucio and Maria Garza. And my mother was born in Kingsville, as was her mother and her grandmother, and so on for many generations. So on my mother's side of the family, we go back to, I think, the Coahuiltecas of that area. If it wasn't the Coahuiltecas, it was the Carancoa. And on my father's side, he came from Nuevo Laredo, and from the Garzas, the old Garza family, which is known today as de la Garza Falcon. And I was born and raised there, so I didn't leave until I was already an adult. And I've been living in San Francisco for 24 years now. When I was 5, my older brother came home crying from his first grade class because the teacher had punished him for speaking Spanish. She held out his hands, palms down, and slapped him across the knuckles with a ruler. This incident was very confusing because, according to my parents, we were going to have fun in school. So we looked to them for an explanation of this reaction over such a natural act as speaking and why he deserved the unusual punishment. The pained expression on my parents' faces and their mute silence haunts me to this day. How could they explain to their small children that the punishment was for racial and political reasons and not because he had done something bad? Children don't understand the political reasons for discrimination and racism. They only take it very personally, and I did take it very personally. The incident and the punishment caused much discussion between my parents and their friends whose children were also experiencing the same treatment. Even though it had been 7 years since my father and other Mexican Americans had returned from military service during World War II, things had not changed very much in Texas. And now that their children, the baby boom generation, were becoming of school age, the discrimination continued. Discrimination against the Mexican American was the main reason my parents became involved with the American GI Forum, a World War II veterans organization of Mexican Americans who fought for civil rights. One of their first activities was to sue a funeral home for refusing to receive the body of a Mexican American hero killed in the war. My parents decided that from then on, we would practice speaking only in English and not both languages as we had been doing. I did not understand the distinction between the two languages, and many times my parents spoke both languages in spite of their decision. Uppermost in my mind was the fact that I was next in line to attend school the following year. My first grade teacher was a bit more compassionate and explained that we spoke 2 languages. She demonstrated this by bringing from her bedroom a huge fluffy pillow with colorful embroidery and said that the name we knew for it, almohada, was Spanish and pillow was English. I knew and used both words. Knowing the difference between the 2 languages did not save me from using Spanish in the classrooms and on the school grounds, so I too suffered many physical and emotional punishments. Each time I spoke English, I was ridiculed for my accent and made to feel ashamed. At a time when most children start to realize that there is an immense outside world and communication is an important vehicle towards becoming a part of that world, the educational institution was punishing me for speaking 2 languages. In high school, we could take classes of Latin, French, or Spanish, but the Mexican American students were not allowed to speak Spanish in the other classrooms or in the halls. Other students could practice their new Spanish words and phrases while walking down the halls. Yet Mexican American students could expect punishment for doing the same. The punishment wasn't with a 12-inch ruler across your hands. It was with a 30-inch paddle that had holes drilled into it so that there would be less air resistance as it landed on the back of your legs. I graduated from high school confused, depressed, introverted, and quite angry. The Chicano movement for civil rights of the late 60s and early 70s clarified some of that confusion and started the slow process of self-healing and provided a format to vent some of that anger. I had decided at the age of 13 to become an artist, so when I was in college, the Chicano movement nourished that goal and gave me back my voice. Anytime, what I did is I would sit down, whenever I had a chance, I would practice drawing. And I did my drawing on notebook paper that I gathered from my brothers and sisters at the end of the school year, from the neighborhood kids. Everybody knew that I liked to draw. So they would save their notebook paper, because at that time, you did your homework only on one side, so the back side was clean. And then, of course, if there was any leftover clean paper, they would give that to me. So I had stacks and stacks of homework paper that I used to practice on to do my drawing. And then my parents saw that I was serious about drawing when I started to use my babysitting money that I worked as a babysitter, that I started using my babysitting money to buy sketchbooks, real sketchbooks, and charcoals and drawing pencils. And when I did that, that's when they realized that I was serious about being an artist. And they were very supportive of all of us going to college. And so in their mind, I was going to be an art teacher. And that made them happy that at least they knew that I would be able to survive in some way, because they knew I could get a teaching job somewhere as an art teacher. When I was doing my student teaching, in getting my training at A&I, art education training, we had to practice teaching in a public school, and I was assigned to Robstown High School, which had 80% Mexican American and Mexican students. And we were still not allowed to speak Spanish to the students, and I got into trouble for speaking Spanish, the instructions to my students during class time. Then I got into trouble again because we had music piped into the classroom that was only tuned to a country western station, and I turned it off, and I offered the students the option of listening to their own records that they could bring from home, the first half hour country western and the second half hour to Spanish music. Well, one of the students complained bitterly, and he went and complained to the principal, and it just so happened that it was the principal's son. A few weeks later, not too long into the fall semester, I heard screaming and yelling at the end of the hallway, "Viva la raza, walk out now." And it was the Chicano students from the high school walking out in protest because of the conditions in the school, the lack of relevant education, and the fact that there was only one Mexican-American teacher or faculty staff, and he was the assistant coach. So during lunchtime, when I always went to sit at the picnic table across the street from the principal's office to eat my lunch, was where the students had congregated in protest. And so I sat down and asked them, do you know what you are doing and why you are doing it? And yes, they knew why. They were very articulate about what they felt they needed to get in their public school education. And just then the superintendent drives by in his Cadillac. So the next morning I was met by my supervisor from the university as I was driving into the parking lot, and he quickly jumped out of his car and informed me that the superintendent was not allowing me to continue with my student teaching, nor allowed to step anywhere on campus, and that if I insisted on talking with him about it, he would kick out every single other Mexican-American student teacher from the entire school district. Well, I was part of the baby boom generation that went to college in great numbers, and many of us were in education, and I could not jeopardize their careers. And so I didn't insist on talking to the superintendent. I later did finish my student practice in Falfurrias. I was not allowed to have control of the class, but I did finish, and I did get my degree, and justly so, because I was a straight A student in the art education classes and the art classes, and B+ student in all my other classes. I found out as I was finishing up my senior year that all of the Chicano boys who were 18 years old, who were in that walkout, or who reached their 18th birthday during the walkout, were immediately drafted into the army and sent to Vietnam. By the time their co-students were going to the senior prom in May, they were in Vietnam. And all of those boys lost their innocence. And many of them lost arms and legs. And one of them came back wrapped in the American flag. And it was at that point that I decided all of my artwork I am going to dedicate to my people, to my community, the Mexican-American community, because we have every right to feel proud of who we are. We have every right to celebrate our culture and our language, our languages. And so the anger, the pride, and the self-healing had to come out as Chicano art. The faculty and white students criticized Chicano art as being too political, not universal, not avant-garde, not abstract, but too figurative, too colorful, too folksy, and too primitive. What they failed to see was that the art that I was creating functioned in the same way as the savila plant, the aloe vera plant, when its cool liquid is applied to a burn or an abrasion. It helped to heal the wounds inflicted by discrimination and racism. We needed to heal each other and ourselves, so we started by choosing a name for ourselves, Chicanos, a name to symbolize our movement for self-determination. The accomplishments by our parents during the 1950s civil rights movement were not enough. We started to speak more Spanish in public places, and we worked to get our civil rights. We started to explore and emphasize our unique culture in the visual arts, music, literature, and theater. My goal as a Chicano artist was to start with my earliest collections of my life, recollections of my life, and validate each event or incident by depicting it in a visual art format. I needed to re-celebrate each special event or re-examine each unusual happening. My 1 year that I taught in a public school in Austin, Texas, at a junior high, it was the school that was in East Austin. It was predominantly Mexican-American and African-American, and the two did not mix. They would come into the classroom and they would sit in their separate sides of the room. No matter what I tried to do to get them to mix, they didn't want to mix with each other in the sitting arrangement. And so little by little, by doing things with the artwork, they were able to mix. And finally, we were working on a mural that we were painting on paper because we couldn't paint on the walls. And we were working after school and on weekends because I couldn't put that into the curriculum. They already had the curriculum figured out for me, so I couldn't have that much of an input. So this was like an elective that we did after school, and the kids would come, and I had my record player, and I had sodas for them, and they would come, and they would stay after school till around 5:30 or 6 o'clock, painting on the floor, because we were painting on a big piece of paper, and we were trying to finish these 2 murals for the Cinco de Mayo celebrations at the school. And so the last weekend before Cinco de Mayo, we were there all day Saturday and all day Sunday, and we were still working on it Sunday night. And there we were on the floor painting, and the kid, one of the girls said, "Psst, Miss, look." I said, "Look at what? What?" She says, "Look over there. Look at what?" She says, "Look out the window." So I look up, and I see all of these guns and policemen pointing their guns through the open windows at us, and oh my God, so I got up very calmly. The kids were horrified, they were terrified, and they stayed on the floor with their brushes in their hand. They didn't dare move. I stood up, and just as I was standing up, this big sheriff comes in with his, huge guy with his gun, 2 guns, and he said, "What is going on here?" I tried to explain that we were working on these murals, and on. And here I am, a skinny teacher with long hair, and I got these little glasses, and I look like one of the students. And he wouldn't believe me that I was the art teacher, so I finally pulled out my driver's license and all my IDs, and finally he believed me, and he said, well, did you inform the principal that you were going to be here? And I said, yes, I did. He said, well, we were not informed, so you got to clean up and get out of here now. So we had to quickly finish up and get out. But as I was talking to him, two of my other students that I had sent to the auditorium to check up with the janitor on the installation of the paper cutout came running down the hall so fast. They were terrified, and they almost jumped up on me when they got into the room because there was two cops chasing them. So it was difficult because I knew that there needed to be change in the structure, and there needed to be change in how we would actually get the kids to work with each other and to work on things that would challenge them. And so the only way to do it was after school and on the weekends. And so it was difficult. I have been doing Chicano art for Chicanos, but also for others to see who we are as a people. If my heart and humanity is seen through my art, then hopefully I will not be excluded from rightfully participating in this society, my American society. And so, entonces aquí les doy un pedacito de mi corazón en mi arte. And so now I give you a little piece of my heart in my art. Lights down. Thank you. So this is at my mother's friend's house, next door neighbor. She had a cold that turned into a lung infection. And of course, she had been to the doctor to get her prescription medication. And you can see it here. But she also asked the curandera to come and do a cleansing for her, so that, because so many times when you get sick, it's not just a physical illness, it's also an emotional or a spiritual illness. And you need a whole healing, not just a physical healing. And so the curandera came and brought her herbs and made teas, and she rubbed her down. And also she burned copal incense in the coffee can here and read prayers for her. El milagro, the miracle. I came home from school one day, and my mother was very excited because she had heard on the radio that the Virgen Guadalupe had appeared in a little ranch outside of town in Alice. And so as soon as my father got home from work, we got on the truck, and we went looking for this ranchito, and we got there late in the day. And this is what I remember seeing. And it made an impression on me because I could see that the two young vaqueros were pointing to these rattlesnakes that they had gone out into the cotton fields and killed and caught and brought back and hung them at the foot of the water tank because they were afraid that people would go out into the cotton fields and get bit by the rattlesnakes. So they were trying to warn people not to go out. And the image stuck in my mind because you could make out the image of the Virgen Guadalupe in the water tank. And I took artistic license and depicted her full figure, but in the water tank, she was from the waist up, and it was these water stains. And people who are very good at visualizing could make out the image of the Virgen, and those who didn't have very good visual acumen couldn't make her out, and so they didn't believe. And it reminded me of a painting that I had seen in the Catholic Church of the Virgin standing on the world, stepping on a snake. So here were the snakes at her feet. And there was people all over. They were, some were praying, some were just talking and visiting with each other. And here's the family of the ranchito. I kept asking my mother, what are you going to do with that bucket of water? What's that for? And she just didn't have the time to explain to me. She and my father went out into the front porch. She took a piece of rolled up newspaper, made it into a cone shape, and put it in my father's outer ear, and then very briefly ignited it and let the edge burn. Well, my father was, during World War II, he had an injury to his eardrum, and it didn't quite heal properly. So sometimes when he went swimming, water would get into his ear and get trapped in there and cause an infection. And so this was a treatment that my mother did to relieve some of that pressure and evaporate the water. And so then she would take that burning newspaper and throw it into the bucket of water. That's what the bucket of water is for. Tamalada. I try to show the whole cooking process of making the tamales. In our family, everybody has to help make tamales. So here's the cooking process, starting with cooking the meat with the spices and the chili powder and the masa. Here's my mother spreading the cornmeal, and we're helping, putting in the meat and rolling them up. And then here's my grandmother putting them in the pan. These are going to be cooked in the oven. This is my grandfather and myself and my sister Margie washing the corn leaves with, so that the dust and the corn silk is washed off. It's not just the girls and the women that make tamales, but the boys and the men have to help, because you know we have lots of family and friends coming over for the Christmas holidays. And so everybody has to be fed. We have tamales for breakfast and then sometimes again for dinner. Cumpleaños. This is my 6th birthday party and Arturo's 4th birthday party. And we had 2 piñatas, which my mother made. The fish piñata because he liked to go fishing, and my rose piñata. He got to go first to hit the piñata, and he was mad because he didn't break it and get all the candies. And then it was my turn. I still have this dress. My mother made this dress for me. And here's my mother and my grandmother, my father, my grandfather, and aunts and uncles and neighbors and cousins and school friends, brothers and sisters, lots of kids. We have a tradition in our family that when a child reaches the 6th birthday, they get a huge party. And so this was my 6th birthday. Sandia. This is a summer evening after dinner, eating watermelon. My grandparents were migrant workers, and I really liked it when they would come back because we missed them so much, but they came back with some of the fruits and vegetables that they had harvested. And my favorite was when they would bring back watermelon and cantaloupe. But of course they wouldn't bring just one. They would bring like a dozen. I call this Sandia Fria, pedacito de mi corazón, because if you want a little slice of the center part of the watermelon, which is the sweetest, we had to say, dame un pedacito del corazón. Give me a little piece of the heart. Valle in 1958, dance in 1958. There's a restaurant in Kingsville called El Jardín, and it has a patio where they used to have bands performing. And I really liked it because after dinner, we could stay and dance. And it was not just the adults that were dancing, everybody was dancing. And of course, I got a chance to dance with my father, my grandfather, and with the other kids. When I was growing up, we wore petticoats. And when you got asked by a boy to dance, if you know that in the outer circle is the fastest lane. If you want to dance real tight, you dance in the middle. And so what they would do is they would ask a girl to dance who had a lot of petticoats, and when they came around to that area where the other boys were sitting down, they twirled the girl really fast so they could see her panties. They were also good dancers, so you couldn't turn them down. And even though critics and art historians and so on need a label for it, they've labeled it narrative art. That's pretty safe, you know. I call it monitos because that's what my grandmother used to call my artwork. But the narrative artwork tells a story, and it engages the viewer in thinking about their stories, their experiences. I never dreamed that I would be doing children's books. The books came about because I already had my paintings, and the publisher wanted me to illustrate somebody else's story after she saw my exhibition at a museum. And I didn't have the time to illustrate somebody else's stories, and I really didn't want to do it. I really wanted them to do a book about my paintings with my stories about each painting, because each painting is like a short story. And when I showed the slides of my paintings to children, to high school students, I am doing oral history, basically. And it's a story, it's a short story. And so it was kind of risky for the publisher to do, and they finally decided to do it, and now it's their top seller. And so tons and tons of kids are reading my books, as are their teachers and their parents. And it's a wonderful feeling to be able to reach them with my artwork. And I get feedback from teachers all the time, and they all say that the kids really are inspired, They're inspired to do their own artwork, and they're inspired to do their own writing, which is so crucial. And then they combine the two together, just like I do it in my book. And they're able to express themselves about something that they're very familiar with. It's not Dick and Jane going up the hill. It is Rosita y Juan Manuel talking about their birthday party for their tío, where they had cabrito. And there was a fight. And their cousin proposed marriage to a girlfriend, and they decided to announce it at this birthday party. So on and on and on. And so this inspires the kids, and it's the greatest, to me, the greatest reward and the greatest criticism and review of my artwork is to see the whole family, the Chicano family, standing in front of one of my paintings at a museum, excitedly talking about what's going on. And even the teenagers who are trying to be real cool and look interested, you know, kind of like listening to what their parents and their grandparents are saying about the painting, and the kids excitedly saying, well, we just did that last week. And here it is in a painting in a major museum. It's taken a lot of hard work, a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of personal sacrifice to get that painting in that museum and to get it in the book. In my travels, you wouldn't believe how many people from the East Coast, from Boston, say, have no idea of the life and culture of the Southwest. It's totally foreign to them. But this is American culture. This is part of America. We've been here for a long time. And so my artwork pulls them in. And if there's a greater understanding and a greater awareness, there's a greater acceptance. And we have to work together to make this country work, continue to work as an experiment. And so the greater familiarity there is between the different cultures that we have in this country, the stronger and more powerful we will be. So as far as I'm concerned, my artwork is helping to fortify this country. Because if our children feel good about who they are, and they're here in this country, and they've been here for generations, then they can fully feel very much that this is their country that they need to defend and to work for and to strengthen. And so that's why it's so important that our children see themselves in a fine art form that is hanging in a museum. And that's what I've been doing.